Hey, Stick Figure Historian here. Welcome back to the American series. So, I know I kind of got off track of the Roger Williams theme in the last episode, but I'm gonna kind of keep on going with it here. Just for a couple episodes. Today, we're gonna talk more about Anne Hutchinson, picking off where we left off last week. So, we talked about her beliefs about free grace, and about her butting heads with the Massachusetts Bay Colony leaders about the Bible study meeting she was holding in her home. Nothing much came of that, but unwittingly, Anne was about to become an integral piece in a grander scheme of church-state politicking. Thomas Shepard, a pastor from Newton, Massachusetts, began writing letters to John Cotton. He said he was concerned about this doctrine of free grace that Cotton was teaching, and frankly quite alarmed at the unorthodox, which unorthodox just means not commonly accepted, ideas that he had heard some of the Boston church members talking about. But Cotton didn't pay much attention to Shepard's letters. Then John Wilson, the original pastor of the First Baptist Church, returned from his trip to England. He was one of those Puritans who believed that you must prepare yourself with good works in order to be saved. This was clear to Anne and her followers from the very first day he stood up to preach. Instead of listening to Wilson's false teaching, Anne and the others looked for any excuse they could to get up and leave whenever he stood up to pray or preach. This was obviously rather irritating to Wilson, but he tried to ignore it for now, especially since the newly elected governor, none other than Sir Henry Vane, was an ally of Anne's. Remember he was attending her house meetings? Yeah, so getting her in trouble wasn't going to exactly be feasible at the moment. But though Wilson tried to pass over things for now, conflict was not to be averted. Shepard was rather annoyed that Cotton was taking no heed to his letters, and he began to talk bad about the Boston church in front of his own congregation. In response to this, John Wheelwright, a free grace preacher, went to a large hill beside the Boston church meeting house, and there began to loudly proclaim to the world the errors of salvation by works. It won't surprise you, perhaps, when I tell you that this bold preacher was Anne's own brother-in-law. Wilson was really getting irritated now. It wasn't an easy thing to ignore this fanatical hilltop preacher just outside his church door. Now people were publicly debating these ideas of free grace and works salvation. Things were getting ugly fast. John Winthrop, along with the other original founders of Massachusetts Bay, was seriously alarmed. If all this debating continued, their colony was doomed. At least, their city on a hill dream was doomed. They called the teaching of free grace Antinomianism, which basically means lawlessness. They were afraid that people were going to start doing whatever they wanted instead of following the strict rules and laws they had set up. This controversy was threatening their grand holy experiment. There was one person, that seemed to be at the bottom of all this. Or at least, it was a convenient place for Winthrop to pin the blame, and that was Anne. Winthrop was clear in spelling out his issues with her. One Mrs. Hutchinson, he wrote in his journal, a member of the church at Boston, a woman of ready wit and a bold spirit, brought over with her two dangerous errors. One, that the person of the Holy Ghost dwells within a justified person. Two, that no sanctification can help to evidence to us our salvation. Strange words coming from a man who claimed to be a student of the Scriptures. In any case, Winthrop followed Vane in office as governor in the year of 1637, and with that marked the beginning of the Antinomians' troubles. Wheelwright was the first to fall. He was promptly brought to trial, convicted, and banished. Anne was the next victim. The little woman stood straight and tall as she faced her cruel accusers that trying day of November 7th. They proclaimed that she had slandered ministers, disturbed the peace of the Commonwealth and churches, and continued the meetings in her home after they had been condemned. Yes, the Commonwealth. I gotta tell you, that word just annoys me. It's kind of like empire or something. Just sounds big and bad and just nasty. And what in the world does it mean anyway? Oh, thanks, Webster. Let's see. An established form of government or civil polity, or more generally a state. A body politic consisting of a certain portion of men united by a compact or tacit agreement under one form of government and system of laws. The term is applied to the government of Great Britain, which is of a mixed character, and to other governments which are considered free or popular, but rarely or improperly to an absolute government. The Commonwealth is properly a free state. A popular or representative government, or a public, as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The words signify strictly the common good or happiness, and hence the form of government supposed to secure the public good. Summing that up, basically means the government, usually a representative government. Or, second definition, the whole body of people in a state, the public. Which, if it's the whole body of people, I don't see how you could say she was bothering the whole body of people, but I guess if you're going off the first definition, I don't know. Whatever. Moving on. But the court could get no direct answer to any of the accusations they levied against her. Anne expertly evaded and deflected their questions, only giving vague answers, and sometimes not saying anything at all. She had to be very careful because anything she said could be used against her. Since there was no paper evidence that anyone could bring against her, she hoped that if she spoke wisely, that the court could not truly convict her. At least, Anne thought there was no paper evidence against her, but it turned out otherwise. You see, a full year ago, a private meeting had been held at Cotton's home to discuss the disagreements that were breaking out over this antinomianism. 7 other ministers attended, along with Anne and a few other leading members of the First Boston Church. During the course of the conversation, a few of the ministers said that they had heard that Anne had called them unfit ministers of the New Testament, on account they were preaching works salvation. One by one they questioned her, and pressed her to admit whether she had said so. She was hesitant to answer at first, but had at last admitted that she had. Well, it turns out that 6 of these ministers had written down her answers from that day, and these hateful traitors now stepped forward to present their papers.